Take my hand. I'll lead you into death. By a Whispering in the Shadows, on AO3. Episode 19. Chapter 11. Hitoshi was not good with change. He was uncomfortable enough in his own mind to admit that to himself. For most of his life, change did not bring good news. A change in job and location brought strain on his parents' happy relationship when he was 3. The change of gaining his villainous quirk caused strain between his classmates, teachers, extended family, his parents' friends. The list could go on. A change in schedule for a hospital appointment for getting himself into trouble again got his parents into a car crash that made them lose their lives. Yes, therapy had taught him that it wasn't actually his fault, and he was only just 6 at the time, so he couldn't have actually done anything, but it still haunted him. Then, changes from orphanage to foster care to orphanage again, in a horrifying circle of never having a real family or friends, brought his fair share of pain, abuse, and neglect. His change to the last orphanage was the worst, as well as bringing him into his middle school years. It was that orphanage that introduced muzzles to Hitoshi, and just how cruel the world could be to mind and voice quirks. Ever since he met Eraserhead, his final and most influential reason to become a hero, one fateful night that involved a stray cat and a homeless man, and Hitoshi just trying to do the right thing. Most change has been good. He got his family. Eri being added was also a good change. He got into his hero course, kicking, screaming, and just barely scraping the mark, but he got there. With his place came his provisional license, and a shit tons of friends he wasn't expecting, as well as a bunch of villain attacks that didn't body well for his anxiety. All in all, ignoring the villain attacks the best he could, the last number of years had probably been the most stable and best of his life. So it was safe to say Hitoshi was not happy about this new development in his life. Not one bit. Was he hiding most of his true emotions behind anger? Yes. Did he give a fuck that it was a little shit coping mechanism, as stated by his therapist and literally everyone else in his life? Also, yes. But his lack of ability to process his emotions correctly was second only to Bakugou Katsuki. That wasn't to say he wasn't angry, because he was. Though he didn't know it was Reaper at the time, he was already aware his dad had some big case going on. One he was often stressed about, one that Hitoshi could see him scared. Though he was never allowed any detail, he was often told to run at the sight of a tarot card. An odd warning, but he listened. When he and the rest of his classmates were finally let in on the secrets of Reaper, they couldn't help but be afraid. Especially with their strong, stoic, badass teacher and dad being so clearly frightened by them. Becoming friends with Bakugou had been a huge surprise, an interesting development in his life. He had a powerhouse with both his quirks and personality, but not someone Hitoshi was usually fond of. As they grew closer, he learned they shared a lot more similarities than differences. In all honesty, Hitoshi considered Bakugou one of his closest friends, so of course he felt a sort of protective fear overriding him when Reaper began targeting the Vassal Blonde. There was something off with Bakugou, though. Ever since Reaper had entered the picture, something was wrong with him. Hitoshi was one of the first to notice, probably alongside Kirishima, but soon everyone could see it. After seeing him the night the mission to capture Reaper went wrong, hearing him shout for his childhood friend's name, he had mentioned him once when Sero and Ashido had gotten them all drunk. Kirishima made sure they never brought it up again. It was clear why he was acting so odd. To think he believed the deadly assassin that had pros shaking in their boots was his childhood friend? Unfathomable. Yet it had the boy tied up in knots, and apparently he was also correct. They revealed of Reaper's identity did not change of how Hitoshi felt about him. Like it apparently changed his parents' and Bakugou's opinions. Well, maybe not Bakugou, but they haven't had that conversation yet. This was not a change he was comfortable with. This was not a change he wanted, nor he was willing to let slide. Because who cares if Reaper was actually a kid their age? Who cares that he was just a kid taken from his family and hidden from the world? He was still a murderer. He was a murderer who had killed Kami knows how many. One who had specifically targeted his classmates, his friend. It wasn't likely they hadn't faced child villains before. They had to just look at Toga as a primary example. She was their age too, they believed, but no one was doubting her ranking as a villain. Nobody was bringing her home, bringing her to school. They all accepted she was past saving. So what made Midoriya Izuku so different? So special? How could his parents just accept the rat's offer to let a killer sleep in their house? Sleep in the place Eri was? How could they let him near Hitoshi's classmates? Near Bakugou? No matter the weird connections he had with the kid, why was he not being thrown into the darkest pit of Tartarus and answering to the commission? The worst part wasn't even how accepting his parents and Bakugou were being. Hitoshi had eyes. He could see his dads were nearly just as uneasy as he was, yet they just agreed. The others in school didn't really know what was happening, but they guessed it was to do with Reaper. Of course, they were right, and Hitoshi knew some of them had already suspected he would be joining them in school for some reason or another. But that didn't actually know anything, so it was like Hitoshi could gauge how they were feeling. No. The worst part was on the night that him and his friends had found that body. He had never felt so relieved someone had died, and the feeling ate at his consciousness. Because if he was having thoughts where he was grateful for a murderer, then was he any better? Yet, even as the case progressed and Hitoshi's fear of the Reaper, fear for his family, friends, Bakugou, worsened, there would always be that fleeting thought that Reaper had gotten rid of the worst person in Hitoshi's life. And Hitoshi was happy about it. That was the worst part, because it made Hitoshi feel like the villain he always swore he wasn't. And that's what he told himself. Always. The worst part was definitely the fear of losing his family and those he loved. So yeah, it was safe to say Hitoshi was not happy with this change. He was terrified of what it could bring to his life, who it could hurt. He was terrified of Reaper and what he had done. He had seen what he had done, spent many nights researching the dark web for it. He was terrified he would lose the love and happiness he has gained, terrified of how Reaper made him feel, and that made him angry. Anger at Bakugou, anger at the commission and the rat, anger at his parents. Especially anger at Reaper for making him feel like this, for tearing apart the control Hitoshi finally had on his life. He hated him. Until he met him. When Reaper had first walked into the door, Hitoshi was prepared to hate him. His opinion was set, and he would not be swayed. Especially not enough to let the kid call him by his name. He was a lot smaller than Hitoshi had been expecting, hiding behind Bakugou's larger frame. Hitoshi could have given less of a fuck that the blonde was being so protective, even though he knew it was bound to cause more issues later. He nearly felt his heart stop watching Eri reach out to him, every fiber in his body wanting to grab her and haul her to a safe distance. But Shouta stopped him. If he wasn't so set on being angry in the moment, the scene of Eri trying to lure the deadly assassin to take her hand was almost amusing. There was a certain mannerism behind the boy that reminded Hitoshi briefly of a cat, but he refused to let that thought simmer. He was doing well, keeping his opinion on the boy the same. Sure, he was smaller and definitely jumpier than Hitoshi was expecting, and he looked frankly ridiculous and close with his dad had brought. Seriously, why did they let Shouta do the shopping? It didn't matter how he looked. However, Hitoshi was set. The boy didn't need someone else in his corner. He shouldn't have any of them. Then, he stepped, or was rather pulled forward, into the light. It had taken everything in Hitoshi not to gasp. First were the large scars and the bruising across his face and neck. The one through his eye looking particularly gnarly up close. There was a seemingly endless array of bandages peeking out from different sections under the boy's baggy clothes. His size was even more noticeable, walking past the rest of them. None of the men in the room were known for being small, even if Hitoshi and Hizashi were on the lankier side. He also had freckles, which was just odd to see. Those weren't what really caught his attention. No, what really caught his attention were the little scars scattered across his nose, mouth, and jaw. Scars he was all too familiar with. Scars he knew his pops was also familiar with. Midoriya had been muzzled. Kami. Hitoshi hated change. He didn't know why that affected him so much, but very suddenly, he was looking at the kid in a different light, and he was not happy about it. Then, Midoriya dropped the bomb that he didn't even remember food? That he couldn't remember how to eat. Hitoshi didn't feel hungry after that. He didn't know what to feel as he watched that green-haired boy break down. Watched him being taught how to eat with hot pink Hello Kitty chopsticks. He didn't know how to feel as he and Bakugou sat in silence on their way back to the dorms. He didn't know how to feel when they departed without saying a word. And as he sat, pushing around some soggy cereal the next morning after giving up on sleep, while Bakugou glared at him from the kitchen, he still didn't know how to feel. Yes, he was scared, and yes, that meant he was still angry, but he was also confused? Midoriya had confused him, which had him feeling slightly guilty, which he definitely didn't want to deal with. Kami, he was so fucking tired. He nearly jumped out of his skin as two hands landed heavily on his shoulders, jolting him back to the present. Good morning, Oh, Kami. Denki's perky voice sounded from behind him as he made his way to sit across the older boy. He was watching Hitoshi with a concerned expression. You look like shit. Hitoshi rolled his eyes at the crackling from Sero and Kirishima as they joined the boy at the table. He seriously could never understand how they all had so much energy constantly, especially so early on a Saturday. Dude, seriously, did you sleep at all? Denki continues after a minute of joking around, watching him with concern. Hitoshi ducked his head so they wouldn't see his blush at the blonde's attention, picking up his bowl and making his way to the kitchen. Why did he have to catch feelings? They were literally the bane of his existence. I'm fine, he mumbled. Yesterday was just a bit messy. He grumbled, the end, as Bakugou's shoulders checked him, watching past him to sit next to Kirishima. Hitoshi allowed himself the time to empty and clean his bowl, out to collect his thought, and simmer anger. He knew he'd have to deal with Bakugou at some point. He just hoped it wouldn't be too soon. Then again, that would simply be delaying the inevitable, so there was really no point in trying to avoid him. It would only make things worse. He refused to let the other boy control him. However, so he marched straight back out and plopped himself down next to Shiro. He could see the other three watching them apprehensively, even as they tried making casual conversation. It wasn't like he could hide the tension between them. Bakugou was very openly glaring at Hitoshi. After a couple of minutes, he couldn't take it anymore. What? He snapped back at the blonde, who snarled in response. He hadn't interrupted the other's conversation, who now seemed to be holding their breaths as the two boys stared at each other. He didn't care. He was sick of the glaring. I know you could use your voice when you want to, so what gives? Either split it out or stop fucking glaring. You're the one to fucking talk about glaring, Bakugou growled, to which Hitoshi rolled his eyes. Oh, please, is this seriously because I don't like your little boy to... He started. He knew it was mean and uncalled for, but Hitoshi was angry and tired, and so wasn't fully thinking. Bakugou's chair flung out behind him as he stood, hands slamming scorch marks into the table. Don't fucking call him that! He snarled. Hitoshi also stood up, his built-up anger finally releasing itself. The three other boys made noise of protest as they tried to ease the argument. They weren't alone anymore, the common area steadily filling with their classmates, but neither boy cared. It's what he is, right? I don't get why you defend him so much, Bakugou. He's a villain. He was literally aiming to kill you, yet you still fucking protect him? Hitoshi flinched back as Bakugou leaps at him, only stopped by Kirishima's hardening arm. Don't you fucking dare! He's not a goddamn villain! He gritted out, struggling against the other boy. Fucking get off my shitty hair! He shoved him off, making his way towards the elevators, before stopping briefly to glare at Hitoshi again. Don't fucking talk about shit you don't understand, Shinsou. Hitoshi blinked in shock. The tone in Bakugou's voice. It wasn't anger and cold like he expected, but instead almost sad. All Hitoshi could do was stare at Bakugou's retreating back as his anger drained out of him. An overwhelming sense of guilt came over him at his own words registered. Hitoshi didn't mean to be so harsh. Yes, he still doesn't like Midoriya or the situation, but he also knew he was Bakugou's childhood friend once. He didn't mean to sound so cruel. There was this tense silence throughout the common room as everyone took in the argument. Kirishima cleared his throat, glancing awkwardly at Hitoshi. I'm gonna go check on him. Yeah. He stammered out before jogging after the blonde. I actually quite liked that POV. I'm gonna be honest with you. I liked seeing Hitoshi's point of view on this whole situation. I quite enjoyed that, actually. That was really fun. I really like that. I hope we get more of that. I think we are, for the rest of this chapter. So, like, I really enjoyed that. I, honest to God, really enjoyed that. So, I had fun with this. I hope you guys also have fun with this chapter, too. Obviously, I wouldn't necessarily call it angsty, but I wouldn't call it fluff either. It's a mix. It's an in-between, if I'm being honest. You know, it isn't angsty, it isn't fluffy, it just is. Alright? It just is. It's stagnant, I guess? Heart comfort? We can understand how Hitoshi is. We can understand where he's coming from, right? But at the same time, it's like, you can't fault him, but you can't blame him, but you're not really with him? He's a really morally gray character, stuff that I really like. I love morally gray characters. Right now, he's acting in a very gray area. We can understand his anger and his stuff. It's like, is he doing the right thing? Especially calling Izuku a boy toy? No. Also, Denki. I forgot Denki's a thing. If we get Denki, can we get BKDK? If I'm being honest, I don't think Izuku's in a position to be romantically involved with anybody for years to come. So, never mind. I'll headcanon that they get together in like 5 years. Once Izuku is like a little more healed. Yeah. Or Denki and Shinsou don't work out and Shinsou gets... No, never mind. They're gonna be like brothers. Yeah, no. You know, Shindeku is ruined because they're like brothers. Whatever, BKDK it is. Whenever Shindeku is not an option, I turn to BKDK. Yep. Anyways, I think that's all. I'm really tired. I'm really sleepy. It's 10 p.m. It's not even late, but like I'm tired and I'm sleepy and I kind of want to just lay my head down and just go me. Anyways, as always, my raindrops. Make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Well, have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord and merch shop and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.